as a professor, as a researcher, what's your laboratory, what are you doing in your laboratory, and as it relates to animals, and then we'll have time for some questions. Sorry about this glare.
No worries.
I'm using my laptop since my teacher workstation is not working. You did start it? Okay. Yeah, it is started. Good job. It's definitely recording. It is. All right, Jason, it's all you, buddy.
All right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thanks for having me in your classroom today. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me. I feel like I should tell you a little bit about how I got to where I got before I get into what we do in the lab now, because I want you to understand that, as you probably have already heard, we use animals for research in my lab, but I don't come to that lightly. So let me give you a little background. Started off as an anthropologist. Is anybody from anthropology?
We know what anthropology is? We don't know anthropology.
No problem. You know, anthropologists don't know anthropology either, as it turns out, which is part of the reason why I am not really an anthropologist anymore. Anthropology is the study of people. And I got interested in the study of people because I was interested in fossils. I got to work on some of the most famous human fossils. I was a master's student and a PhD student. It really got me excited about learning about anatomy, which is what I am now. I'm a professor of anatomy at Indiana University School of Medicine. For the most part, I teach medical students all of the human body and how it works. And we take them apart. We don't put them back together because I'm not an MD. But the students who are learning to become MDs eventually will be able to put those things back together. I just help them take it apart. That's kind of how I got involved in research. I really like to know how things work. And stuff. I started taking things apart when I was a kid, and that's pretty much what I do now. Whether it be a question where I take apart different aspects of the question, or whether it's parts of an animal or parts of a person when I'm teaching, those are the approach that I take. But anyway, I started off as an anthropologist, and the reason that I am no longer in that field is just because my interests kind of moved away from anthropology, which is a real broad subject, to more of an anatomical approach. So I'm really interested in how the body works. I'm interested in how animals have evolved different body forms, how animals move around in their environments. And so my very first research on animals was actually in the Costa Rican rainforest. I got into the business of studying animals from a behavioral perspective. And so we would run around, we would chase monkeys in the rainforest, we would watch what they were eating, we would check to see who was having children with whom, and that sort of stuff. And we were really interested in the health of the population. So we never handled animals, we just observed them.
So hold on for 1 second. Time out for 1 second. What does that remind you of? We read a story similar to what he's just talking about. Those of you who are with me. What that should remind you of something. He went to a rainforest to study animals and their populations to help preserve them. That should remind you of something, right? Connor. Austin.
Gene Penny story about the penguin.
Maybe. Yes.
It's like that Journey story that I read. I forget what the
Yeah,
Tree kangaroos.
Tree kangaroos, right? Right. So we should be writing things down. But yes, absolutely. So keep that in mind. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Actually, I've studied tree kangaroo morphology before. So morphology is the study of form. And so I'm interested in how bones and muscles are structured in animals with different locomotor modes. And I've actually studied tree kangaroos in the past because they have these elongated lower limbs. They have this really funky way of moving around. And it's different than other animals that are closely related, like the rats, mice, and that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's an aside. So I started off, I'm an animal lover. I started off studying animals in the wild because I wanted to learn more about how, we influence them in terms of habitat destruction and that sort of stuff. My expertise in bone and muscle led me down a path now toward the use of animals for research, which again, I did not come to lightly. It is not something that I am proud of, except that I'm very proud of the work that we do. I'm not proud of the fact that we have to use animals as research subjects. So let me tell you what we do in the lab now. Has anybody here ever heard of a disease called osteogenesis imperfecta? Anyone?
Allie.
is? What is this?
Well, I don't know exactly, but I've heard of it.
Okay. Have you heard of osteoporosis?
Yeah.
Is that
Okay.
does it relate to osteoporosis? Listen. Go
Are
ahead.
you asking me?
Yeah. Does it relate to osteoporosis?
It does. So osteo refers to bone. Porosis means is in reference to pores. So something that is very porous has lots of holes in it, right? Like soapstone or volcanic stone, right? So somebody who has osteoporosis has a lot of holes in their bones, and those holes in the bones actually make it so that their bones are weaker and they will fracture, they will break. So a lot of elderly women will end up fracturing their hips because they no longer have strong enough bones to hold body weight. Or they'll fall down and they'll fracture, and it's usually not a good thing. So we do study osteoporosis in my lab. We try to find ways to help make bone stronger, whether that's through giving pharmaceutical drugs, like those that are made by Lilly here in town, that are meant to try to treat people with osteoporosis. And we also do it through interventions like exercise. We try to find ways to improve the strength of bones through activity. And so osteogenesis imperfecta is kind of related to osteoporosis in two ways. One, it's got the word osteo in it, which again refers to bone, but in this case, osteogenesis, genesis refers to the creation or the making of something, and imperfecta just means imperfect. So somebody who has osteogenesis imperfecta has bones that are not assembled properly. And it really has to do with one aspect of bone. Bone itself is made up of two general structures. There's this inorganic sort of rock-like substance called oxyapatite. It's a mineral. And then there is an organic component that's called collagen. Collagen is all over the body. It's important in giving things strength, especially strength like when you pull on it. That's called tensile strength. So collagen in bone is really highly adapted to withstand this sort of tension, pulling on one end to the next. And that also refers to bend. So when an individual has this genetic disorder called osteogenesis imperfecta, they have really weak bones that work all the time. And because it's a genetic disorder, the vast majority of people who have it are children. And so, when I was studying monkeys in the wild, the thing that really attracted me more than anything else was sort of the growth and development of the babies. They were much more interesting to me than the adults. They were cuter for one, and that's the way it is with human babies too. They're much cuter than adults. I mean, I think everyone can agree with that.
Yes.
So I got interested in osteogenesis imperfecta because I was interested in trying to help children, like you guys. And so right now in my lab, we study osteogenesis imperfecta, but we can't do it with children because the things that we are proposing are not approved for use in people at this point. So here's the sad part about osteogenesis imperfecta. There is no Food and Drug Administration approved treatment for osteogenesis imperfecta. We'll just call it OI for short. There's not an approved medicine to give to children or to anyone for this. So the sort of gold standard is using osteoporosis drugs to try to help people with OI retain some sort of strength in their bones. But that's not really good for several reasons. One of which is that you can only give it for a certain amount of time. The drugs that we give, the medicines we give for osteoporosis end up making the bone quality much lower, so they break still. So it just sort of slows down the loss of bone in osteoporosis. But it doesn't really help the OI patients very much. So what we've been doing in my lab is trying to find new ways to treat children with OI by using mice that have been given, that have spontaneously developed the same genetic mutation that patients with OI have, and trying to find ways to treat them. And so what we end up doing is we raise mice, we breed this colony of mice that have this OI gene mutated, and we put them through various different interventions. The one that we're focusing on a lot lately is exercise. So It's really well known that if you exercise when you're a child, especially, that has benefits throughout the rest of your life. Your bones become stronger and they maintain the structural strength into adulthood, even if you aren't still active. That's important. So right now, the biggest thing I can tell you guys, take home advice is you have to go and run around all the time. Be kids. Run around, fall down, jump down, do whatever you can to put strain on your bones because that's what helps them grow and that's what helps you develop strong enough bones that you will have a reduced risk fracture. Now, all the things I just told you to do, those are considered high impact exercises, right? Jumping up and down, running. Every time you land on your feet, you're smashing your bones, right? How many of you have ever landed hard on your legs when you're jumping and you feel a shock go through your skeleton?
Oh, I have.
That's like it's the worst feeling, right? Because you're like, oh no, what is that? And it's basically just all this force being attenuated through your skeleton. Now, if you had OI, all force would break your bones. So children who have OI can fracture hundreds of times in their lifetime. Right? I broke in my arm once when I was in second grade. So I was about 8 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, and I broke it. And I still remember it, right? I mean, it was a traumatic event, breaking my arm. I still remember how I did it. I still remember who was the person on the other end of the accident. And imagine now if you had to worry about breaking your spine when you cough, or breaking a rib when you sneeze, right? Children with OI have that problem because the collagen in their bones doesn't assemble properly, and so it makes their bones really weak.
So time out for 1 second. Just want to slow down for a little bit. Hey guys, just as a reminder, so Dr. Jason says OI. That's osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a mouthful. That's why he calls it OI, right? Osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a disease. Who has this disease? Raise your hand and tell me. Betty. Children. Yeah, it's genetic. So children have it, and it's very, very weak bones. Is there any medicine right now to fix this problem? No. So the people who have OI, the children who have it, they have to take osteoporosis medicine. Does that fix this?
No.
It doesn't. In fact, it slows it down, but it actually might even make the bones even more elected. That's a
It
real
actually
problem,
makes it
right?
much worse. Let me explain how real quick. So, bone, probably think of bone as sort of this, just this rod of tissue that doesn't do much, right? It's just there. But it turns out that bone is a really living tissue, and it's constantly turning over. So what I mean by that is that there are all these cells. They're called osteoclasts, and there are cells called osteoblasts. Those are the two predominant cells in bone. The osteoclasts, with a C, they consume bone, so they break down bone, and the osteoblasts, they build bone. So they secrete collagen and all sorts of other things that help put bone back into place. So time you walk around or you jump or you do anything, you're bending your bone, you're putting strain in your bones, and you're causing what are called little microfractures, right? They're little tiny microscopic cracks in your bones. And the cells in your bones respond to that by coming in and eating away that crack and putting new bone in place, right? And so people with osteoporosis have an imbalance of those two types of cell activities, right? They have too much consuming of bone and not enough laying down of building new bone. So their osteoclast activity is ticked way up, and their osteoblast activity is either normal or down below where it should be. And so they end up with a whole bunch of bone being eaten away and no new bone to fill that. That's osteoporosis. Okay? So the way that osteoporosis drugs work for the most part are to stop the activity of osteoclast cells. So they stop the breakdown of bone. That seems like a great idea, doesn't it? Because you stop eating away the bone, you get bone that's less porous. That should help beat osteoporosis. But as Mr. Auslander said, it actually ends up making things worse in many cases because every time you load your bones, you cause these micro cracks. And every time you have a micro crack, it has the potential to grow larger and larger and larger. And if you're not consuming away those cracks and putting new bone down, you can end up with a crack that goes from one end of your bone to the other, and that's called a fracture. Okay? So, that's osteoporosis, and that's how osteoporosis drugs work. Osteogenesis imperfecta, OI, they're given the same class of drugs, which ends up reducing the osteoclast activity or the consuming activity of bone cells so that you don't get a lot of weakness of your bones that is due to less bone being there. But it doesn't do much for those cracks. And every time you load your bones, in a normal person, you crack your bones. And if you have OI, it's exponentially worse. Okay? Does that make sense?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Somewhat.
That's a lot for fifth
I
graders.
think,
That's a lot
to be honest, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of us, but you got the idea. Cole understands it. But it's great. You're doing great. So, so you get it's good. Sympathetic. Children have this. It's very, very sad. So talk to us about, if you don't mind, Jason, about the role in animals. You mentioned mice. And at one point I know you mentioned dogs too, and kind of their role, and then at the end of the research, why they have to be euthanized. And you can talk about that, and then if it'd be okay, we'd love to ask you some questions.
Sure. Okay. So I mentioned using mice in my lab. That's not the only animal that we use. We also use dogs occasionally in my lab, and the reason that we use them is because they can give us different information. So bones in a person have a different structure than the bones in a mouse or a rat, and different structure than bones in a dog. But for some things like looking at how osteoporosis drugs work, with regard to the consuming a bone, that is best investigated in an animal model that has bone more similar to humans than not. So mice, because we can breed them quickly and they have short generation time, so they have children quickly and or they have offspring quickly, and then we can generate a lot of animals to answer a question in a short amount of time. Dogs live much longer than mice do, and so going from one generation to the next takes a lot longer, but they are a much preferred model for looking at questions about how drug activity or medicine activity works in terms of bone. We call that bone remodeling, where we consume bone and build new bone. So some questions have to be answered with a model that looks more like a human, and some questions have to be answered or are better answered with other animals. So the point that I really drive home here is that there are so many regulations put in place by the federal government.
Listen.
And by me as the principal investigator of my lab, that safeguards animals from harm. Now, we couldn't test these drugs in people because it's not ethical to treat people in the same way. But because animals can't say, okay, sure, I'm happy to be a subject in your study, it is much more difficult to get a study approved that uses animals than it is for people. People are also not genetically identical, right? And so we are able to remove certain variations due to the fact that, say, Jimmy has brown eyes and blonde hair, and Abigail has black hair and blue eyes, and those kinds of differences in traits mean that they're not genetically identical. Whereas you have mice that all bred for exactly the same genetic identity. So they all have exactly the same genes, and therefore anything we do, we know is happening. Anything we do to treat brittle bones, weak bones, is being consistently applied across a population of animals that are genetically identical, right? So we don't have to worry about either using a much larger sample of people, and you're talking thousands of people, who will be required to answer the same kind of question that 15 mice could.
So talking about genetically identical, that means they all have the same kinds of genes, whereas humans were all very different. In the lab, I know Charlie, I know buddy, Charlie. So that's one of the ways they get them genetically identical, so that they can really rule out other factors. Keep listening.
Right. So another way to think of that is, anybody in the class have a twin sibling? No. Okay. Well, twins usually, if they're identical twins, they have the exact same DNA. Okay, they have the same genes, and They will look different or they will act different, and that's not based on their genetic material, but instead the environment in which they're being raised. That is true also of the mice or the dogs that we use in my lab, because they are all genetically identical, and any deviations from being exactly the same are not due to their DNA or their genes, but instead due to other factors. So we've minimized the effect of different genes, and we're able to answer questions more precisely because we have exact copies of the same animal. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
So, all of the work that we do in the lab is really designed to try to treat people. And so, once we have an idea of how our interventions work, we then move toward trying to treat patients with it. But the experimental aspects of trying to make people better can't be done with people. So let me give you an example. At the end of an experiment, I have to euthanize an animal in order to study how strong their bones are, right?
Just euthanize me. Kill.
Right. It's a nicer way of saying to humanely sacrifice an animal. We never say kill in my lab because, and actually we never write it in our papers because, but it's to us that is a word that doesn't express the full range of emotion that we have for it. So we're really sacrificing the animal's life to try to make people better. It's not that we're just killing animals. But we can't do what we need to do in order to test bones with people. And the reason for that is the only way to measure how strong a bone is to actually stick it in a mechanical tester. We put it across the span here, and then we load it with a known force, and it comes down and it breaks that bone. Okay? Now it's out of the animal, so we have euthanized the animal, we have removed the bone, and it's just an isolated bone. So we're then measuring how strong the bone is. After we have either given it medicine, or given it exercise, a particular type of exercise, or the combination of the two, which is what we do typically with dogs. Combine more than one treatment, so we see if that is better than either single treatment alone. But you can't do that with people because no one's going to volunteer to say, take a medicine, and then at the end of a 10-week study, you can take my leg and you can break my bones, right? No one's going to volunteer for that because it's not something. The only way to test it is to actually take it out and break the bone. No one's going to sign up for that. And so, like I said before, it's actually more difficult to get a study approved by the university and by the federal government that uses animals than people, because animals can't say, yes, okay, I volunteer to have my leg broken. And so there are much stricter requirements. We have to have a cleaner lab and cleaner utensils and equipment and all that than we can do if we have people. People are dirty. People are way dirtier than the animals we use in our lab, even though we're keeping them in cages. We give our animals enrichment, so first of all, they're never kept alone. They always have siblings with them, or at least members of the own species that they're interacting with. We give them toys to play with. When we work with rats, because rats are really social creatures, believe it or not, you can hold them and they like to bury their head in here and just kind of hang out with you. We are very kind to our animals, and I want to stress that anybody who works in my lab who doesn't treat the animals with more respect than they treat me, their boss, is immediately let go from my lab. If you don't have enough respect to treat the animals with they deserve, you don't have my respect and you don't have a job. Because again, I don't take this lightly at all. I don't like to use the word kill because I respect these animals too much. But again, we can't do this kind of work without an animal model first. It's just not feasible. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I'm going to open it up now to questions. Hopefully you were listening and taking a lot of notes, and now I'll open up to questions. I'm going to start with those who are in this exhibition group first, so they get their questions answered, and I'll open up to everyone else. Caitlin, you go first. Questions are off, guys? Eyes and
What do you think about the Beagle Freedom Bill? But if you don't know what that is, it's to stop people in labs from killing the beagles after they've done testing on them.
he has to. maybe for other laboratories, because his
Yeah.
they need to be euthanized. How about for other laboratories? Just like there are some where animals are euthanized and they could be adopted. Ask about that.
So let me explain briefly why the regulation is in place that animals could euthanize after experiment. I'm not averse at all to adoption of animals. Now, obviously, that can't happen because my studies require us to take tissues away from the dog in order to study how our intervention, whether or not this would be useful for people. But again, there are some studies, whether they're behavioral or whether they are other drug treatments that don't require, euthanizing the animal. And so I understand the purpose of the fetal film, right?
Yeah.
Is to minimize euthanization of animals in order to allow them to be adopted. But there's a regulation in place for most studies, especially studies where an animal has been given a medicine, that they be euthanized. And the reason for that is that if they're not euthanized at the end of the study, then there is the possibility that somewhere down the road, they could be accidentally used in another study. And if they are accidentally used in another study, not only is that study compromised because now we've got the interaction of two medicines or two interventions or something like that, but also that animal has been used more than once to try to treat Parkinson's treatment. And that's not good for the animal. And so I understand the impetus or the desire for a bill like this, but because I respect the animals so much and would really hate to see them end up in another study accidentally, I wouldn't support something like that. I would support the FDA and the NIH requirements, the National Institutes of Health requirements that require animals to be euthanized at the end of the study.
So
It's a good question.
So he's afraid that after the one study, they might be used in another study. I wonder if there's any way to prevent that from happening. Come on, if it's your issue, you should have questions. All right, go ahead. It's not your issue. Let's let those who it's their issue go first, and then we'll
Okay. Do you let your dogs go outside and run around in the grass and stuff?
Absolutely. We actually pay a person just to go over and play with the dogs every day.
Could fifth graders be volunteered to do that?
They play catch with a frisbee. I mean, they do all sorts of great things.
Could we volunteer to do that?
Unfortunately, you can't because you're not in high school. You have to be high school age in order to allow.
They get outside every day, you're saying?
I'm sorry?
They get outside every day and they have people who work and play with them.
They get outside every day, multiple days. We pay people specifically for dance dogs. Oh, another thing that we do actually that they love is they love Disney movies. So we'll just put on a VCR with an old, they really like 101 Dalmatians. I guess all of our kids, a story, right, for dogs. But they like the sound of dogs. And so they all gather around the TV and they just sit there and they love it.
When you are done with the testing on the animals, are any of them well enough to be adopted?
You just heard what happens to all his animals.
They all have
Well,
Okay.
okay. Saying
I have a question. Why don't you use any why don't you use any alternatives?
Alternatives?
Yeah, there's some alternatives in the world now, and it keeps gaining up. You should try getting one of the alternatives.
So I'm certainly open to the suggestion you got one, but the reason that we use paws is because they have bone that changes out in the middle of the bone, just like humans do, and rodents don't do that. So if we want to know how a medicine affects the remodeling of that bone in the middle, then we can't use an animal that doesn't have that remodeling in the middle. So broken doesn't. So there's no alternative except a dog. Although pigs could be, but pigs are significantly more expensive to maintain. They're a lot larger. And, so there aren't really alternatives to studying bone except animals that have bone. Does that make sense?
questions? Charlie. Take notes, guys, okay?
Yep, I see the bagel. That's cute.
It's not a question.
Okay, so it's not the point.
So let me tell you what happens on the day that it's experiment. This might put things in a different frame for you. So as each animal is euthanized and we start to take out the various aspects of the dog that we need, everyone gets very quiet. And we all have a lot of thought about the animal that was just euthanized. But more important than that, like when I go home at the end of the day, on a day like that, I just sit quietly in the corner of the room for a while because I'm tired of it. And I know that that's true of several of the people in my lab as well. It's not something that we do because we want to, and it's not something that we take lightly at all. And so when I was a postdoctoral fellow, my boss, who was the principal investigator of the lab, we worked with pigs in that lab, and after every sacrifice, she would go cry. I mean, literally cry in the corner of the room. And that impacted me quite a bit. I'm not a big crier, but I certainly feel very sad for those animals. But I'm also grateful because we're helping to change the way people are treated for a very reason.
Okay, do you have another question? Yeah. Oh, never mind.
So they had a lot of questions prepared ahead of time,
Yeah.
and so a lot of them kind of were answered.
92%.
Okay.
But you just said, like, even though a lot of them, like 92% of drugs tested on animals don't work on humans.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's only an 8% chance it's not working.
That's correct. There's a hierarchy as to how those drugs are developed. So, they start off being tested on cells or proteins, and when they prove to be effective at treating cells, for example, cancer cells are often used to treat various or to test the efficiency of various medicines to try to kill them, right? And if they work in cells, then you have to prove that they can work in an animal. Before you can prove that they work in a human, you have to go through a series of steps because, like you said, most drugs get part of the way through that system and then they aren't effective in human. And so, but they never would have gotten to humans without doing the work with that test shifting in order to get off the chain there a little bit. But you're right, most drugs that are invented are not efficient for treating people. And so the only way we know that is by going through a series of testing from cell, protein to cell to animal levels before we get to humans.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh wait. Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Oregon about anything with anything at all? So we can tell he does not take this lightly. He's a nice person. It's very sad for him, but he's grateful because he's hopefully going to cure
Oh wait.
disease that affects children.
Could you tell us where we could go to like help help dogs or some like legal pets to take action?
So you said high school kids can play.
Yeah, high school.
What if they
like,
went? What if they went with parent? Could they go with the
Yeah,
parent?
could we go with a parent?
Possibly. Not in my lab, unfortunately, because we are funded by the federal government. But there are regulations that the federal government has in place for that. But there are programs. If you guys are still interested, there are programs that get into high school that take internships into the labs, and you can either do some works with animals to provide enrichment, we call it, playing with them, that sort of stuff, or being involved in collecting data.
Okay.
And I'm happy to share that information with Mr. Auslander later if he wants.
Okay.
Great, yeah.
So wait, how would we get to that place or whatever?
you get to that place?
Like,
Well,
what is it called? Like, what is it
So we'll
called?
tell you where we keep our animals because we got to keep them safe.
Yeah, I know,
Um,
like, where would we go? Like, what place?
To help.
Yeah, to help, because we have no idea where to go.
Sure. So unfortunately, most of the animals, at least on the research side in academia, in universities, are tightly controlled, and so you wouldn't be able to do it. And I strongly suspect that you wouldn't be able to eat with a parent. It's not to say that they don't want your help. It's just that there's federal rules, like rules from from Washington D.C. that say you can't do that. We've got to keep children out of the lab. Now that said, scientists, I'm happy to bring students into the lab whenever I can, and there won't be animals in there when we do it. But if you want to take a tour of a science lab, I'm always happy to share what we have here.
That might be cool.
Can we?
We just animals.
Yeah, could we come and like look at the information and stuff?
Yeah, I'm certainly not averse to it. So if Mr. Auslander wants to talk about arranging sort of like
Small
trip
group.
to the lab at some point, even if it's just some of you and not all of you, I'm happy to entertain that idea.
All right, guys. Hey, let's give he gave 30 minutes of his time in the day. Let's give him a round of applause. Say thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Jason. You're a great guy.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. And
Oh no.